Okay, good afternoon, everyone. As we like to say, we know that you have a choice of talks, so we appreciate you choosing this one. And we know it's after lunch, so if you need to take a nap, we'll wake you up. This afternoon, actually, we've been asked to come and join you. So it's not necessarily a presentation where we want to be talking to you, but we want to make this an informal conversation. And we're lucky enough to have two panelists join me who are really well-versed in foreign rights. So let me start with Stephanie Beard. Stephanie, if you can introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you do and what we can plan to listen to.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Stephanie Beard. I'm a director of acquisition at Podium Audio. Before joining Podium, I was the rights director at SourceBooks, and before that, I was an executive editor and rights director at Turner Publishing. So I come from this sort of with rights background from the publisher experience, running and managing a licensing program.
I'm Marc Reklau. I write nonfiction self-help, and I've signed around 44 translation deals, so I like foreign rights.
Oh, nice. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Yeah. And I'm Judith Anderle. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer for LMBPN Publishing, and I'm also the Chief Executive Officer for LMBPN International, which is a sister company of our corporate. So we like to separate the two companies. We're saying that corporate is all English, and international is everything outside of English. And so we have some knowledge in the foreign rights. We also had someone that was going to lead the panel. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it. And so, but we were able to get some of his questions, so we want to make sure that we have his presence here as well, and we hope he gets better. I think one of the questions that we have was really important, and by the way, as we go through, if you all have a question, feel free to ask it, because I would hate to wait till the last minute whenever there's a rush and your question doesn't get answered, so please ask it, because someone else might have the same question as you. But in the absence of any questions to start off with, let me kick it off with what have been some key takeaways from your own experience in selling or purchasing rights abroad? So Marc, since you have that much experience.
Yeah, so for me, the probabilities are indefinite. So I try to keep Spanish, English, German, everything that I can handle with Amazon ads is mine. And then everything else I sell, even if it's sometimes, $500 for Albania. So the advances are not so huge anymore, but I see it like a lottery kind of. So you put your lottery ticket in, and I would say like 10% of my deals worked really well, and the other 90% made me huge headaches, but the 10% take care of the headaches. They are so making me so happy that the headache goes away. And what I want to say is also, because I got also asked, like, how do we do it? Do we write to the publishers? Yes, that's what you can do. But in my case, it was pretty funny, because in 2016, I wrote to all the agents. I got rejected by all of them. But what I see, and that might be a nonfiction thing, when you are selling a lot of books on Amazon, everybody comes. So many of those who rejected me on 2016, I signed maybe in 2020 to 2021. So the best tip, sell many books. Yes, everything what I can manage myself. I mean, I'm a big supporter of Amazon ads. They work really well for me, so I don't want to give those away.
So did you pay out of pocket to get those translated then?
Yeah, I'm lucky. So I speak Spanish, and so I translate good enough to translate them all myself, and then I give them to a Spanish editor and proofreader, like the same process. But if you sign a deal with a publisher, they will take care of it. You only have to sign, and they will do it all for you. So that's the nice thing. Yeah.
So the question was, what rights did Marc retain, and how did he get the work done? So that's what he was answering. Yes? Oh, okay. And then there's a mic here as well, so if you can come up, because we want our brothers and sisters who are in the digital hemisphere to also hear what we're saying. And yeah, we were threatened before we came on, so. So Stephanie, what about you from your experience on the buying side, or even if you've had experienced some work that you've done as well? What are the key takeaways that you've learned?
Yeah, sure. So on the foreign side, I've actually always kind of technically been on the selling side.
Okay.
So from a publisher's perspective, at the publishing houses I've worked at, we've typically acquired foreign rights when we have, purchased sort of like we were doing traditional publishing deals. So we were acquiring foreign rights. I then, on my side, would engage subsidiary rights agents in each territory who would then, I would meet with multiple times a year, send updates to, and it was their job to kind of solicit the biggest deals that they could with local publishers, who I also met with multiple times a year as well. So, really kind of the end goal as a publisher, licensing rights, is to find a publisher that can do like at least as good of a job as we're doing domestically in a foreign country, and to make sure that we're making the biggest deal possible. And I've seen a lot of different situations with foreign rights coming into a publisher. So I previously worked at a publisher that acquires a lot of indie authors, and those authors would join our company with a lot of different rights dispositions. Some had sold rights on their own in other countries, and I would basically take over their portfolio and look at opportunities to kind of maximize their sales and their licenses. And I did that based on years of kind of experience and working with certain publishers, knowing sort of what the expectations reasonably should be, communicating those with the authors, and then negotiating the best deal we can. And of course, like if you do work with a publisher and a publisher is representing your subsidiary rights, you typically then split those with your publisher. So I will say for many of the authors that I worked with who had been previously indie, and then we were representing their rights, there were significant differences in their deals. So it's not always a bad thing if you have the right kind of rights team working on licensing your rights, but obviously there's many different ways to do this. But that's my perspective.
Yeah, I think that from our side, we're on the publishing side. And we also have a lot of intellectual property that is owned by us, so we then, we're on the negotiating side, right, selling our rights. And so a couple of things that we've learned, and I think that I would, from our side, take away is that really only you can value your work, because we get a lot of questions as to, well, how much should I ask for, or what is the amount? And frankly, I think that there is no one answer, right? How much work you've put into what you're doing. Be careful, because you can overvalue it. I have examples of both sides where, I thought, oh, we're so great, and it should be X. And I actually lost out on 2 deals that to this day I'm still talking about, and it was 3 years ago. Because, at the end of the day, you have to think that you want fair, right? You want fair compensation, but you don't want to get too heady that you think that, somebody has to pay you a lot of money. It's opportunity, like Marc said. Sometimes he gets some advances that are high, and sometimes he doesn't. But only you can take that decision and value it. Another thing is that from understanding and learning, coming to these conferences, not necessarily this particular one, although we're glad you're here, but take the time to go to conferences. And if I'm yelling in your ears, because we have noise outside, so I want people to hear, but take the time to learn and research, because then that way you can know how much you should get or where you should get, and what, right? Going rates. Everything varies. And so, you have panelists here. Like I said, if you want specific amounts, and experiences, I don't know that anybody would divulge their own personal ones, but doing your research can tell you what's really fair. And the other thing that Marc mentioned before was about networking and talking and putting yourself out. So these, from our standpoint, from LMBPN and the experiences we have, these are some of the key learnings that I think would be important for anybody who's looking to enter into the foreign market, in particular negotiating foreign rights.
Yeah, Judith said something very important. You have to know what your books are worth for you, because, for example, if I sell to Albania, I'm just going to enter the market. I don't need a high advance or whatever. When I sold to China, I thought I'm rich already, because the book had 16,000 reviews on Dang, that's like Amazon, but my editor told me it only sold 16,200 copies, so I didn't believe that. So those are the cons, but you have to try it always. So also another story, I got a friend of mine that was in Japan, and he wrote me a Facebook, said, congratulations for 150,000 sold books in Japan. And I was like, oh my God, because at that time my numbers that I had were like 82. So in your head you go like, ooh, 150,000. So that's like, wow, there's a big check coming. And then only 7,000 came, and I was like, oh, what's going here? But the publisher, of course, for marketing, they put numbers on the cover, and then when you see it, it's a little bit sad, but it's okay. So, but I would always buy this lottery ticket and know what your book is right. See, for example, on Tuesday, a huge Spanish publisher, the Spanish division of a huge publisher, they asked me, they wanted 2 Spanish books from me, and I told them, no thanks. I don't want to risk it, because those books are bringing in money. They are like on the core of my whole system. You know the system, you know, 2 best-selling books of my series. Everything can go downhill when I sell them, and then the publisher doesn't manage to sell them. So I said, no, I'm good, thanks, and I'll keep like slowly but surely putting out my own translations.
And did you say it in Spanish?
Yeah, I told
Okay.
him in Spanish, very polite.
You said no in Spanish?
No, exactly.
No.
I said it very polite. I said
No.
in Spanish, things are going well, and I won't risk it. Thank
Right.
you very much.
Right. I mean, we're all kidding aside. I think one of the questions that was going to be posed to us by the panel was taking sensitivities into mind, cultural sensitivities. So Stephanie, as you go around the world and you negotiate with different entities as well, how important is keeping in mind cultural sensitivities and differences in negotiations?
Sure, and to kind of tie into the last question too, I mean, I will say, for everybody, our kind of like experience and our interactions with foreign publishers and foreign markets are all going to be a little different. I, in my career, have managed probably 3,000 foreign rights deals, and so I kind of had a very specific knowledge as to each market, what kind of fair market value was for licensing, not for selling, obviously, which is very different. But one of the really important things that I always find, in kind of managing a catalog that usually spanned many genres, was actually like finding out from foreign publishers what's working for them, and specifically like what it is that, is kind of performing well on their list, what it is that they're looking to build out, and then responding directly to them by pitching specific titles. Like even if I had an author on my list that I had sold for a 6-figure deal in Germany, if I was working in, the Italian market and I was meeting with them and they kind of were explaining that there was some cultural sensitivity that is in this book, even though like I know that they're sort of, the same type of publisher in that market, I might not pitch it, or I might throw in kind of the warning or the caveat that that's, kind of included. Because the thing you have to remember too, if you're sort of like working in a foreign market is, as a non-native speaker, you're not really going to be able to find out at the onset, like what kind of the cultural sensitivities are from those readers, and you might receive very different responses in some countries than you do in your own. So really kind of making sure that you or the team that you're working with or whoever it is that's selling your rights or packaging them understands like if something will work in that market. And licensing rights, if a publisher is buying your rights, they know that they know that it will work, so that kind of adds a little layer of protection. But I think you can probably speak a little bit better to the decision to enter into certain territories.
I think you said it all. So it's. I can't add anything to that. It was amazing. I would like to have a 6-figure deal in Germany because that's cultural differences. I'm German and I don't sell books in German.
Well, I was going to say it's kind of funny, like anecdotally to your last question about market rate. I mean, making sure that if you do decide to license rights, like I'm sitting in for Chip MacGregor, who's an agent who sells foreign rights, and similarly to how I have as a rights director at a publishing company, knowing what the market rate is for the publishers you're pitching to is so important. I remember I took over the foreign rights for an indie author who had previously sold her rights to the same publisher for $400 a book, and I brought her rate up to $80,000 a book. So,
wow.
So there's, however, she did become much more successful in between that time, so perhaps she could have gotten that deal on her own as well. But, making sure that you have sort of, really good advocates on your side if you do decide to go the licensing route is super important.
Yes, and I think, also part of the discussion in taking sensitivities into mind is when you're negotiating, how to approach the negotiation, right? And who you're speaking to. And these, again, are learnings that I personally have taken from, that I've taken from speaking to different people. The other day I was writing a counter offer. And I was writing it in typical, American thinking. I have a JD, so I tend to try to watch myself because I can be legal, and sometimes it's offensive to people, which I don't understand why. It's factual, but anyway. So without going into either side of how you feel about it, I went into ChatGPT and I said, take my email, look at it, and make it more persuasive, keeping in mind that the reader is German and keeping in mind German sensitivities. And I thought, and sure enough, it came back with something, a suggestion that I actually took to heart and used it. And so, but because I remember that, hey, the way I approach it might not be the same way the person listening because of the cultural differences might take it. And of course, I want to put my best foot forward. So keeping those nuances in mind is really important as well. Yes.
Thank you. I was wondering, do you have any tips for connecting with a team that is a good fit for translation rights? So far the translations that I have done have been coming to me more passively. So I've done 4 translations, Polish, German, Czech for a few of my books.
That you have done, that you do the work, or you've hired people?
No, sorry. I have had publishing houses come to me and ask about my books, and
Okay.
I have used Ally to help me, negotiate
Yeah.
those deals, and
Oh,
it's
we
worked
love
out
Orna.
well.
Yes.
Yes, but I would like to be more proactive in finding good fits for my books. So do you have any recommendations on the best way to find a team to work with? I recognize that that's something that is just not going to be my specialty as an author, especially as I expand and grow, but finding the right team feels a little bit overwhelming. So any tips on finding that relationship?
Sure. Stephanie, you want to?
Yeah, I can probably speak to that.
Yeah.
So, if you're kind of interested in licensing specifically, it sounds like instead of publishing yourself, we just left the agent panel where we addressed this too. Cassie, who was on our panel, is a former agent, and her advice specifically was that if you are looking for, because you probably would work with an agent if you don't have a publisher who has like kind of an in-house subsidiary rights division, is if you're just looking for an agent to just represent your subsidiary rights, like query them in the same way that you would query them otherwise, but say specifically like this is my track, this is what I've done so far in foreign, I have fans in all these countries and would really like to make my books available there. Pitch yourself to them and make it clear that like you would be a valuable addition to their foreign rights list, because those agents are going to be the ones going to Frankfurt, going to London, sending catalogs, and they're going to have the relationships in place to be able to license you effectively, because that's so important too. Like, it's really hard to know just from an email from a foreign publisher what their capabilities are. And as someone who has taken on foreign rights situations from indie authors, there were a couple that had sold to digital-only houses when they should have been published by like massive houses in foreign countries, and kind of walking that back afterwards is a little tough. So if, in my opinion, like if you're interested in working with someone to help license your rights, going through the querying process with an agent is probably great. It's really kind of the only path I know other than like having a publisher handle it, so yeah.
And Marc?
Yeah, I started also out with an agent, but it didn't work out. I'm a very complicated client, but I'm happy and grateful that I did, because I learned a lot. So of course, I had no idea how the contracts work and everything, and it's really good if you have an agent who does that for you. I don't know about you guys, but if I can give you an advice, I wouldn't sell the exclusive. That's what I wouldn't do with the agent, but probably most of them want exclusive, because what I noticed, when you sign exclusive with the agent, the time will come that the publishers come directly to you, and then you have to give it to your agent. And if your agent is great, that's awesome. But mine wasn't so great, and then it was like I was like, this would have come without him. So I'm also from southern Germany. We are famous for being a little too greedy, like the Scots. And yeah, but I would really say go with an agent, and I'm sure you have better luck than me, because I'm difficult.
No, not at all.
There are just some funny situations too, where if you have the right agent, which is like the most important piece of the puzzle, even if they come to you, that agent, if they're working for you, should be able to make that deal bigger, for sure. So yeah, and if you're not confident that they are, then they're not the right fit for you.
Right.
If I can add, because that was the problem, because I was like, I thought the agent, exactly like you said, I was like, they will do better deals and better terms, and at the end they always asked me, so what do you want, Marc? But then I don't need you. I can.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to who do you feel comfortable working with, right? Oh, the wrong buttons. Oh, there you go. It's like, oh wait, who do you feel comfortable working with? And one of the things that I do is just something that I require. Anybody that approaches me, whether they want to, have our works translated by them, or somebody that wants to be published by us, or frankly any type of relationship. Because we are looking for long-term relationships. Even in our work for hires, we're not looking for somebody who's going to come in and do a project and leave. So the first thing I require is a Zoom meeting, because that's going to tell me how open is the person to interacting. And I know Zoom, it's not as good as being in person, but we can't be everywhere all at once, and some of us can't travel, right, for whatever reason. So I require that, because right away I can tell if it's somebody that I'm going to have a good in a personal relationship with, and then we can talk about everything else. And I always lay out my terms at the beginning, and then that I'm not talking about percentages, I'm talking about what I request, you know, and the requirements that I have as an individual in working with the person. So, so getting to know the individuals, and I guess taking in mind everything that's been said. And by the way, just a qualifier, obviously we all have different experiences. Some of us advocate agents, some of us are independent, so we will talk about our experiences all together. And everybody's sensibilities are different, so I do like the Germans, even irrespective of the area. Yes.
So if you are looking outside of independent and you are trying to get some outside help like a subsidiary rights agent, is there a more or less rule of thumb of what they might be looking for volume-wise in your sales in your own language first? Or does that run the gambit? Because I'm assuming that if you've only sold maybe like 5 copies of a book, other people might not really want to translate that or help you translate that. But again, I'm very new to all of it, so I'm not sure if there's a specific ballpark, maybe?
I think like anything else, there's no one answer, right? It all depends on, again, the story, how good is it? But for the most part, at least from our side, what I'm now experiencing, in the beginning, had you asked me several years ago when we first started, I would say, oh, if it's a great story, it doesn't really matter. But frankly, we're in a reality where, you know, time is money, right? And so if you come to somebody with following, with quantities, all of that is much better than one book with no following or, you know, no sales. So it's that kind of range. But Marc?
Yeah, I think I get the worst deals always because I'm a poor self-publishing author, but still, it's also not important because I have this view. If I have to enter the market, that's it. You know, for example, Japan, I thought I get a huge advance of 50,000, nothing. I got 5,000, but it's an advance, and if your book sells, then you will get that money later on. And so sometimes it's better. So I actually, less than the advance, I look for the percentage, because I also get like 7% or 8%, and I try to put the percentage up a bit, or say, well, let's say 7 until 5,000 sold, and from 5,000 sold 8%. But as for me, you know, my main income is my self-published books on Amazon and my audiobook. So it's a nice free money, sometimes we call it, and I'm vouching like I take what comes. So I sold 3 books to Albania. I think it was like $570 a book. So I'm not going to be rich, and less in Vegas. The money is already spent.
Well, it depends.
but yeah, but when it goes accumulating, and it's really awesome, and then there comes something. The more foreign rights you license, the more books are out, the more offers come in. And what I also notice, if one book works, they will come back for book 2 and 3. So that's amazing.
Yeah, and the thing I would keep in mind too is, so if you're going to an agency and asking just to have them represent your foreign rights, you're cutting out the main thing that they want to do, which is to try to sell you to a traditional publisher and really kind of exploit all your rights. So I've never been an agent, so I can't speak from personal experience, but, you know, from being a publisher that was looking at buying, you know, subsidiary rights and valuing those, I would say that, like, you know, you're trying to get on somebody's list, have somebody like kind of encounter the overhead of like taking your books to foreign countries and putting them in their catalogs and stuff and trying to sell them. So like, I would have realistic expectations, like depending on your own sales in the US, like if you have kind of a strong enough pitch to get in, and keep pitching yourself to them too, because I will say, like, what I've encountered for sure is that the agent scene is changing significantly, and I mean, you all have changed it, which is what's, I mean, you've changed publishing, you're changing agenting, like, you know, it's really amazing. And I think that there are going to be more opportunities in like having kind of bifurcated rights relationships with agents than there have been in the past. So, so yeah, you know, like put together your pitch and, you know, sell yourself to them, but also make them sell themselves to you too, because your agent works for you. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you.
I always like to say that no doesn't mean no, it just means not right now, right? So, yes.
Hi, Judith. Good to
Hello.
see you.
Likewise.
Marc, this question is more specifically for you, and it's moving a little bit forward from where a lot of people are asking questions at right now. But if you already have some books translated, in my case it's German, And I'm extroverted and I'm very active on social media. And so I really want to reach out and start building relationships with my German audience, which is not huge at this point, but I hope to grow it. And I know that I'm very good at growing audience based on personal interactions, but I don't speak German. So
Oh, you don't speak
I do
German?
not
Oh,
speak
okay.
German, no. But I've been told by some German people that are like, oh, it's fine, just use Google Translate. We understand, like, it's okay if there's flubs, like, no big deal. But yeah, and so Judith, yeah. So I see the expression you're making right now, Judith, which is one reason I'm asking this question, is because I want to be both professional, but I also want to do something that only I can do as the author. And so I'm just kind of wondering where in that space there might be room for, and of course, Judith, you can answer too. I'd love to know all your perspectives, like how to reach out to a foreign language audience when you don't speak that foreign language. You know, I have a very, very avid English-speaking audience and lots of super fans and really great relationships with my people. So
Yeah.
I just want to expand that if I can, but I don't know how.
How? So, well, you asked of Mark, so Mark, let's
Yeah.
kick it off, yeah.
I think many authors who are successful in Germany, they do it in German. Then they translate the newsletter and everything. And then when they talk to you, you know, you do Google Translate, and that's it. Also, a lot of people in Germany speak English, even if they buy your book in German. So, for example, I sell more books in English than in German in Germany. And I don't even, that's also one of the things why I have no success in the German market, because I didn't do the newsletter in German. So if you do that, that will be good, and they are nice people, as Judith already said. So
Yes. Yeah.
Amazon, I would do it with Amazon ads. I would do it with Amazon
Well,
ads.
I think you're talking more the actual process, yes. So
Yeah.
let me let Stephanie, and then I'll come back to
Yeah,
you.
because I was gonna. You mentioned how well English books sell in Germany, and I wish I could remember the figure because I just saw it recently. But like the English book market in Germany specifically is really fascinating because like a lot of English books are outselling their German counterparts. Like especially I found that at the company I was at before, where we had worldwide distribution for our English books, but then would also license the rights. The German publishers kind of ended up feeling a little defeated if we had our English book on the market for a year before they would release their own German edition. And what we found too is like a lot of the authors who were really successful in the German market who spoke no German would still, I mean, we had authors that were flown over to have massive events and, you know, were really in demand and spoke in English, and a lot of their fans spoke in English because they'd read their books in English. So, you know, we had definitely had authors in the past who have just engaged in English and have found that their fans would use Translate and stuff. TikTok and Instagram were the two that I saw had the most impact there, but I mean, you can probably speak a little bit
Yeah.
more directly, you know, to those.
TikTok, yeah, with book talkers. But the first thing I want to say is, first of all, congratulations for thinking of your fans in their language, because you don't have that, you know, arrogance, right, of I speak English and therefore they'll follow me. So that's a first good thing. Second thing is, depending on where you are in your career, if you can afford to hire somebody who can be your social media person in German, right, you can go to like upwork.com. I mean, we've done it, where we'll go in there and say, we need somebody, the person that we work with in Germany was out on a cruise, and we wanted to put out this, you know, a release. And so I went up to Upwork and I found somebody, a real nice lady who does for one of the furniture companies. If you can't afford it, but you still have the sensibility, you could always put in there, hey, I don't speak German, so here's my best attempt, or use Google Translate. As long as you're open with they will follow you. And frankly, what I found, in particular with the Germans, they're very nice if you tell them. Sometimes I'll respond to an email and I'll say, I don't speak German, here's my best attempt with Google Translate, and I'll respond in German. And they appreciate the fact that what I would not do, and that's why I giggled, I would not use Google Translate and put it forth as because there are some nuances. And so it in my opinion, and I've seen people get offended because but if you're out,
Exactly.
here, I'm doing my best, I'm trying to service you in your language, they love it. So yes, that's,
Thank you so much.
you're welcome. You're welcome.
I have 2 online questions, and I'm just going to read them straight. I am an author, but I know little to nothing about this
Okay.
subject, so I'm just the messenger here.
But can you read them in French?
No. The first question is, how can someone retain their copyright and still convert their text into German? Do we basically have to use someone not in Germany to translate it and then post it there?
So I guess.
That was the
I guess
question verbatim.
The question, I guess, presumes the moral rights and the intellectual property that the translator has. Okay, so I do have an answer, but I'll let Stephanie or Mark, if you want to take that?
I don't think, I mean, as someone who's only licensed rights, I don't think I have.
Okay, all right. Mark?
I didn't understand it quite well. I think, so what many people do is they just sign a German translator
Yes.
on a fee, and for to hire, and then they
Yes.
get a translation, and that's it. So the royalties and the rights stay with the author. So that's what I do. What I would do.
Right. What we do is we specify that we're doing work for hire, and we specify that we're keeping the intellectual property. Now, having said that, countries vary and the laws vary, so it doesn't matter what I write and it doesn't matter what we think. Ultimately, it has to do with countries. But the best protection that I found for us is that we specify that we're keeping those rights, irrespective of what, and then that way, if the person doesn't want to work with you, they don't want to work with you. So that's what I would do. I would specify that I'm keeping those rights, and then I would do the work for hire.
And the German market, I think, is a little bit different. So I don't know 100%. So the best would be to talk to a German author
Yes.
or to talk to Marc Dawson, who does to an author that translates to Germany, because I'm like really, I do even my German translations.
Yeah, I mean, we do get translations in German, but we have a different methodology, and we do specify that we're keeping those rights. Again, I have been told by attorneys in the countries that irrespective of what we do, the countries have their own laws, so, yeah. Definitely, always. Oh, by the way, so I'm a JD, so I'll tell you this, always have everything in writing, everything, no matter what it is, and make sure that it's understood. And if you're writing it in English and if you're writing it to somebody in German, you need to qualify. Hey, I'm writing this in English, and the English portion will be binding. Is that going to protect you? I don't know, because if they take you to court in Germany, I'm not a German lawyer, but at the very least, you're trying to protect your rights as much as possible. Yes.
There was another talk about the specifics of the German market,
Mm-hmm.
and we were told that there is a specific law in Germany where you cannot transfer copyright.
Right.
So that I think that might be where it's.
That's,
I have heard
Right.
whispers about that law, so
Yes,
I think
that's-
that's what that question
again-
was referring
again-
to.
right. Right. So,
Physically located in Germany, then
right.
copyright cannot.
Ergo, my earlier response that it varies by country, so each country has their own law, and by the way, each person has their own understanding of the laws. So I always, when somebody tells you something, I mean, you gotta listen to it, but ultimately, I think the best way to protect yourself is to put forth your understanding. You're hiring this individual, you're paying them for a service, and your understanding is that you're keeping that copyright, and hopefully that'll protect you. Yes.
And I don't want to be Debbie Downer here, but
Why
if
not?
but I will
'Cause your
be.
name is not Debbie,
if
that's
somebody
why.
starts with that, you know that now the Downer will come. No, so if somebody wants to, can I say screw you? Yeah.
Sure, why
If somebody
not?
wants to screw you, it doesn't matter if you have a contract or
Yeah.
not. So you also have to be a little bit fatalistic. For example, in India, I did a huge mistake. Don't do it. I sold away my English right for the Indian subcontinent because I said,
Wow.
okay, I'm going to do the US and everything, but India is fine. And it says they can only sell in India and all of that. That's the contract says it. 2 years ago, books of Indian books, which of course are smaller and cheaper, started showing up on Amazon.com, cannibalizing my books. And I talked to them. I said, guys, look at the contract. You are here in breach. What's going on? And they're like, no, we can't do anything because those are people that buy the book in India, and then there are resellers. So we can't do anything. So if that it was a mistake, I learned from it. I wouldn't do it today. So that's the thing. When they want to screw you, they will. You can also, if you want. So, but it's always great to have a contract and
Yeah.
be positive.
Yeah.
All right, the second question was a little more broad. I tried to get them to narrow it down.
They wouldn't.
No dice, yeah. Earlier, I guess you mentioned, someone said something, and I didn't catch this, but they said you mentioned learn as much as you can about foreign rights, and they were then asking if you have resources to learn,
We
and
do.
if you have any suggestions for that. So that was the second question. Thank you.
Fortunately, I do have a slide coming up, so I think whoever, I didn't pay anybody to ask that question, by the way. But resources, any that you can think of that you would suggest so that people can?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be curious to see what your slide says.
Oh, okay.
But I mean,
It says talk to podium. No.
I mean, I think that, kind of as someone who's taught myself the foreign rights market, seeing where the deals are and how they're being reported and who's buying and, paying attention to the nice deal, great deal, very nice deal language to really kind of determine where advanced levels are going to be in other countries is important. And it also can give you an idea as to what genres are selling. And also talk to your friends. Like, you're at this conference, which is amazing, and you can share information. So, and I don't think anyone here is afraid of like kind of giving anecdotal advice to one another. So,
And I think yes.
You said to read about foreign rights and other deals.
Oh,
Where
yeah.
are you reading those
Oh,
things?
sorry. On Publishers Marketplace is where many of them are reported, but probably, I would say probably like 50% of the deals are reported there. But it's, I think, probably the only place where sort of like actual live deal reporting exists.
And Google also helps, and then usually that takes you to the publisher marketplace. So yeah, I learned a lot with Google.
I have two resources, but before we get to that, there's a question that the panelists had that I think is important for you all to think about is, and maybe advice from the team here. What should authors be cautious about when negotiating terms? What's one or two things that you can talk about?
Okay.
Besides knowing that
As a
somebody might screw
self-published
you.
author who doesn't have an agent, everything, terms, language, because sometimes it can happen that you talk about something with email and then a contract comes and you're so happy and you would sign it, but you start reading it and it says nothing what you were emailing or something. Before, when that happened, I got always very angry and sent them far away. Now I'm just asking them, I'm telling them, oh look, I think you got the wrong model of your contract because nothing is there. So you have to always watch. So it's terms is important, language. So normally language, if it's a language that's not on Amazon, like Albanian worldwide, nothing can happen. And I try to get 5 years so that if it doesn't work, I can get them back again. And there's lots of more things that they know better than me.
Yeah, I mean, a couple different things. I mean, first of all, like as an attorney myself, like I think that like giving someone the advice if you're going to license books in a foreign market that you don't understand sort of, the laws in that country, or, kind of the customs and the norms of contracting, having an attorney or an agent work for you and evaluating those opportunities if you expect for those to be a major part of your business is really important and an invaluable way to seek kind of help and guidance, especially since I have seen, spot on authors really kind of double, triple, quadruple their deals by actually having guidance and help from somebody who has experience in that space. And so, yeah, I mean, I honestly think like kind of depending on what your expectations are as to what your foreign rights business is going to be, kind of setting that goal of, selling, being like, okay, I'm going to license my books in foreign countries. If I'm going to do this, I want to get help. Is that going to be an agent? Is that going to be an attorney? And kind of like finding the right person who fits for you, because there are so many different caveats. Like I would say, one big general kind of thing to look for is if you're licensing foreign rights, those typically should be termed deals. Keep an eye out for anything that's life of copyright in a foreign language. Always keep an eye out to see whether or not any costs are recouped in a license. Is the publisher expecting to recoup the cost of translation? I think those are a couple biggies. And then also really just dig deep and do research on the foreign publisher who's contacting you. I mean, I would be contacted by publishers I'd never heard of all the time and do a bit of digging and find out that they were, digital only, but the book that I was licensing had huge print opportunities, so I would decline their offer and keep looking for another publisher. So, don't be afraid to decline an offer if you vetted it and something feels off about it.
Yeah, I think, from my side, there's one thing that whether you have an agent, whether you're doing it yourself, don't be afraid of the contracts, because I know the legalese, it's easy for us to say, right, if we're used to contracts, but even if you don't understand something, review it and make sure that you're clear on it. Now, I review a lot of contracts, right, been schooling them, and yet I found that a major corporation did the following, and so I always use it as an example, because you really have to watch out for not only the fine print, but also the definitions. Because we did a contract where the list of the works was going to be in the appendix, so the agreement said, we're contracting the following, and the works are here. So immediately I go to the appendix, yep, that's the series, yes, those are the titles, great, perfect, we're all together. Then they wanted future works, anything that comes, audio, this was an audio contract, within the series is exclusive, and I'm like, I don't know, do I want to give them exclusivity for the series? Okay, yeah, I understand that. All right, why not? It's a great company, major corporation. It was a coup for us to get it. So I start reviewing the contract closely, and then what happens, I look at the definitions and look at how they define series. I mean, it's extensive, but let me put it this way. They were saying prequels and sequels relating to the series, the works that I was giving them. And they said any spin-offs, and this includes works created by other authors. So basically for this one, my understanding of series, they wanted the prequel, the sequels, if I had a collaboration, and on and on. And everything, and by the way, if I created a series that had some essential elements, not even the titles or anything related to the series, what they were claiming that they were getting through this one contract, through this one advance for this one series. And so then I said, you know, being polite, hell no. I didn't say hell no, but I said, no, this is not going to work. And the pushback was, well, our attorneys said, you know, and this is industry. And I went back and I said, well, please let your attorneys know that no. And respective of what industry does, for me, I value my work. I know what it is, and I'm not going to give you everything. So then they said, okay. And after a couple of negotiations, they came back and they said, okay, look, this is what series is going to mean. So they shortened it, right? And I look at it and I'm like, wait, so you're still leaving prequels and sequels and spin-offs and other literary, so but you basically, it's like, wait a minute, so what part of no didn't you get? And again, but don't forget, what I risked by pushing back was that they could walk away, right? But I would rather have them walk away than to give everything that these people were asking for. And believe it or not, this was in the definitions, so not necessarily in the body of the terms. And lastly, this is what we ended up with. Series means the works published under the same series title as Appendix 3, which basically we ended with what I thought, right? But it took a while, but again, I was not afraid of them walking away, because ultimately only you can value, and only if you really care are you going to review these agreements the way they should. So the call out for me is to watch out for definitions and how they're defining terms.
100%, and don't be afraid that they walk away. Somebody else will come if the book is good. And one thing that came to mind, sometimes they will tell you, well, it's just in the text, don't worry, it won't happen. And it's like, no, when it's written in the contract and you sign it,
Yes.
then it will happen.
Oh.
So you really have to insist to get this stuff out of the contract.
So I'm getting that hook. Remember the Gong Show? This ages me, but remember the hook was coming. So I'm getting the hook. We have 3 minutes left. So really quickly, you guys were asking about resources. So I happen, and I'll let the panelists also, if they want to expand on it. Orna's book from Ally. This is an outstanding resource. If you do not, and I have no association with them. I don't get a penny or anything like that. These are just great resources. Really get that book. That really taught myself and a lot of the people that work with the basic on foreign rights and how to reach people that will work for you, translate. So a lot of the questions that you had will be answered there. Also, I just came across Jane Friedman's. I know she's been around for a while, but go to her website. She's got a lot of resources. I went ahead and printed this out for you guys. I got 15 copies printed. They're also available digitally, but it's basically, she's got a really objective worksheet that tells you if you want to work with a traditional publisher and when an agent is required, or if you want to do it yourself and when it doesn't require an agent. So I thought that this would be a great resource for anybody who wants a copy. Please, it's here for you to use. But these are the resources that I thought in a few seconds would be ideal to know everything you wanted to know about foreign rights, but were afraid to ask.
I second it.
Yes? Okay. Great. Any other questions before we leave? Nope. Okay. Well, I first of all, thank you for Marc's and Stephanie's time. We really appreciate it. We're here. We're around if you have any more questions. But again, inform yourself and own it, and don't be afraid to check and make sure that you're getting what you deserve. Okay. Great. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.